hidden moments pushed them from ordinary life into history. In this video, we are not just looking at success. We are looking at the road before success. We are going behind the public image and stepping into the untold side of greatness. Because the truth is simple, no influential person was born as a legend. They became one. And that journey is always more painful, more human, and more surprising than most people know. If you stay with me until the end of this story, you will not only see how the world's most influential people rose to the top, but you will also understand the patterns that connect them. You will see what they did when life became hard. You will see what made them different. And you may even recognize something in their story that can change your own life too. So let us begin at the place where every great life begins. Not with glory, not with applause, but with uncertainty. Most people think influence starts when the world begins to listen. That is wrong. Influence starts much earlier. It starts in silence. It starts when a child looks at the world and feels that something is not right. It starts when a young person feels pain, pressure, hunger, loss, or injustice, and instead of accepting it, begins to ask why. The world's most influential people were not all born rich. They were not all born educated. They were not all born safe. Some were born into comfort. Many were not. Some grew up in homes full of books. Others grew up in homes full of struggle. Some had support. Others had only a dream and a deep sense that their life had to mean more. That is one of the first truths we must understand. Great influence does not come from one kind of beginning. It can rise from a palace, a village, a broken home, a war zone, a classroom, a prison cell, a small business, a poor neighborhood, or a lonely bedroom. The starting point is never the full story. But the beginning does matter, because early life leaves marks on the heart, and those marks often become the fuel that moves a person forward for the rest of their life. Think about the names that shaped countries, industries, ideas, and generations. If we strip away their titles and fame, what do we find? We find children trying to understand the world. We find young minds watching adults fail, watching unfair systems work against ordinary people, watching pain repeat itself again and again. Some of the most influential people in history were deeply shaped by what they saw very early. A child who watched poverty may later fight for economic change. A child who saw violence may later become a voice for peace. A child who felt invisible may later build something so large that the world can no longer ignore them. A child who lost a parent may grow up with a wound that becomes ambition. A child who was always told no may spend the rest of life proving that no was never the final answer. These early experiences matter more than most people realize. They do not just create memory, they create direction. But here's the strange part. At the beginning, these future giants often look very ordinary. There is usually no sign above their head. No one announces that history has entered the room. Their teachers do not always see it. Their neighbors do not predict it. Even their family may not fully understand it. Many influential people looked like dreamers with impossible ideas. Some looked stubborn, some looked strange, some looked too emotional, too quiet, too bold, too curious, too difficult, or too different. And the world has always been uncomfortable with people who are too different too early. That is another truth. Before the world celebrates unusual people, it often punishes them. Before it rewards them, it misunderstands them. Before it calls them visionary, it may call them foolish. That is why the early stage of every powerful life is often full of tension. A person begins to feel that they are meant for more, but the world around them may not yet have a place for that kind of mind. This is where the hidden story begins. Not in the spotlight, but in the conflict between inner vision and outer reality. A young person may have a strong idea of what could be possible, but life keeps showing them limits. Money is short. Family problems grow. Society says stay in your place. Fear says be careful. Failure says give up. Friends move on. Doors close. Doubt grows louder. And yet something inside refuses to die. That inner refusal is the seed of influence. The most influential people are not just talented. They are often the ones who keep carrying a private fire long after others stop believing in it. They may cry. They may break. They may feel lost. But they do not fully let go of that fire. This is not because they always feel strong. In many cases, they do not. They simply cannot live with the idea of never trying. It is easy to admire a finished life. It is harder to respect the unfinished stage. But that unfinished stage is where the deepest truth lives. Before the speeches came the silence. Before the success came confusion. Before the headlines came loneliness. And before people were called influential, many of them were simply trying to survive. Some worked small jobs while carrying huge dreams. Some studied late at night while others slept. Some failed in public. Some were rejected again and again. Some were deeply afraid that they were wasting their time. This part of the journey is often hidden because it does not look exciting from the outside, but it is the most important part. Because this is where identity is built. This is where a person learns whether they are controlled by comfort or by purpose. This is where pain stops being just pain and begins to become discipline. There is a reason why the early lives of influential people matter so much. It is because power without context teaches us very little. But struggle with meaning teaches us everything. If we only study what people achieved, we may become impressed. If we study what they endured, we begin to understand. And once we understand, we can learn. That is why this story is not about worshiping famous people. It is about uncovering the human patterns beneath extraordinary lives. Because when you look closely, the world's most influential people are not magical creatures. They are human beings who responded to life in a different way. They were hurt, but they kept moving. They were doubted, but they kept building. They were afraid, but they kept stepping forward. And many of them were shaped not by ease, but by pressure. Pressure changes people. For some, it crushes them. For others, it reveals them. Many influential figures were formed in seasons when life gave them no easy path. That pressure could come from politics, family, racism, war, poverty, competition, illness, grief, exile, or failure. But pressure alone is not enough. Many people suffer. Not everyone turns suffering into influence. So what makes the difference? The difference is often meaning. The people who shape the world are usually the ones who connect their pain to a larger mission. They stop asking only, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What am I going to do with this?" That small shift changes everything. It turns victimhood into vision. It turns confusion into movement. It turns one personal life into a force that can affect millions. Let us slow down here, because this matters. Influence is not always loud in the beginning. Sometimes it looks like quiet observation. Sometimes it looks like anger at injustice. Sometimes it looks like a notebook full of ideas. Sometimes it looks like a lonely habit repeated every day. A future leader may begin by listening more than speaking. A future inventor may begin by taking things apart just to understand how they work. A future reformer may begin by feeling deep pain when seeing others suffer. A future writer may begin by noticing what everyone else ignores. A future business giant may begin by selling something small in order to escape a life they refuse to accept. The world often misses these early signs because they do not yet look big. But the size of the beginning does not decide the size of the future. There is also another hidden truth. Many of the world's most influential people were driven by contradiction. They carried strengths and weaknesses at the same time. Some were brave in public and deeply insecure in private. Some inspired millions but struggled with loneliness. Some changed systems but could not fully escape their own inner battles. Some looked calm on the outside while carrying storms inside. This matters because people often imagine greatness as perfection. It is not. Great influence can exist inside a very imperfect person. In fact, many influential people become powerful not because they are flawless, but because they learn how to use their flaws, wounds, and limits as fuel. That does not make them saints. It makes them real. And reality is always more useful than fantasy. When we study the early stage of influential lives, one pattern returns again and again. They often faced moments when they could have become smaller, but chose not to. A door closed, but they searched for another. A public failure embarrassed them, but they returned. A powerful person told them they were nothing, but they kept going. A system pushed them down, but they rose with more clarity than before. These moments may seem small at the time, but in truth, they are the turning screws of destiny. A life does not usually change in one giant instant. It changes through a series of choices made under pressure. Do I stop here, or do I go on? Do I become bitter, or do I become better? Do I hide, or do I speak? Do I follow the path given to me, or do I risk making a new one? The most influential people answered these questions in ways that separated them from the crowd. Still, we should not pretend they always knew the future. Most did not. They did not wake up one day with a full map of their life. They moved through uncertainty like everyone else. They guessed, they failed, they adapted. They tried one road, then another. They changed, they learned, they lost, they started again. This is important because many people wait for perfect clarity before taking action. But history shows a different lesson. Clarity often comes after motion, not before it. The people who shape the world do not always begin with certainty. They begin with conviction. There is a difference. Certainty says, I know exactly how this will end. Conviction says, I do not know exactly how this will end, but I know I must keep going. Conviction is stronger than comfort, and comfort has never changed the world. Many of the most influential lives also begin with a deep sensitivity to something others ignore. This may sound simple, but it is powerful. Some people notice problems and move on, others notice problems and cannot rest, and that inability to rest becomes the start of their mission. They see hunger and cannot forget it. They see unfair laws and cannot stay silent. They see weak technology and imagine something better. They see broken systems and believe change is possible. They see human pain and feel responsible to respond. This deep response to reality is often what separates a normal life from a historic one. It is not only intelligence, it is not only ambition, it is deep attention, plus deep refusal. They refuse to accept the world exactly as it is. But refusing is costly. Anyone who tries to change something important will face resistance. That resistance often begins very early. Family may not understand, friends may laugh, society may judge, experts may dismiss them, they may have no money, no power, no audience, and no proof that their effort will succeed, yet they continue. Why? Because influence is often built in private long before it is seen in public. Private habits come first. Private learning comes first. Private endurance comes first. In the early phase, no applause carries them, no reward is guaranteed, no crowd cheers them on. This is why the beginning of greatness is often the purest part. It is built without the reward of attention. It is built on belief alone. And belief is not easy to hold when life becomes hard. Imagine carrying a dream while people around you are only trying to survive. Imagine believing in a new idea while every result says you are failing. Imagine knowing that you are meant to do something important, but not knowing when, how, or even if it will happen. This is the emotional climate where many influential people were formed. They learned to continue without visible proof. They learned to work while feeling uncertain. They learned to carry hope through long seasons of silence. And that is where many ordinary people stop. They do not stop because they have no ability. They stop because the gap between effort and reward feels too painful. But the people who later shape history often survive that gap. They remain in the process long enough for results to finally appear. We should also talk about fear. Fear is always present in the untold life story of influential people. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling a myth. Fear was there when they were young. Fear was there when they first spoke up. Fear was there when they risked reputation, income, safety, or belonging. Fear was there when they failed. Fear was there when they were mocked. Fear was there when they had something to lose. But the difference is this: they did not wait for fear to disappear. They learned to move with fear sitting beside them. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is action in spite of fear. And the people who changed the world were often scared more often than we imagine. They simply refused to let fear make the final decision. At this point, you may be wondering what kind of people we are really talking about. Are we speaking about political leaders, inventors, artists, activists, entrepreneurs, spiritual figures, writers? The answer is yes. Influence wears many faces. Some people change the world through government, some through technology, some through business, some through moral courage, some through words, some through action, some create new systems, some break old ones, some build movements, some start conversations that keep growing long after they are gone. But no matter the field, their early story often contains the same raw materials: restlessness, pressure, vision, rejection, discipline, risk, failure, endurance, and above all, the ability to turn private struggle into public force. This is why the phrase untold life story matters so much. Public history is often too clean. It gives us dates, victories, titles, and results. But real life is messy. Real life has long nights, wrong turns, shame, arguments, tears, and doubt. Real life has moments when a future icon thinks about quitting. Real life has confusion that would never fit into a short quote or a polished biography. And yet those hidden moments matter. They are often the moments that reveal character. Anyone can look strong after success. But who were they when nothing looked certain? Who were they when no one clapped? Who were they when the world gave them every reason to shrink? That is the question this story wants to answer. The first section of this journey is not about one single person. It is about the common beginning that connects many of them. It is about the soil from which influence grows. It is about understanding that great lives do not begin in greatness. They begin in tension, in questions, in wounds, in strange dreams that make no sense to the people around them, in hunger for something more, in the quiet decision to continue. When we understand this, something changes in us. We stop seeing greatness as something distant and magical. We begin to see it as something human. Difficult, yes. Rare, yes, but human. And once it becomes human, it becomes useful. Because now the lesson is not just, look what they became. Now the lesson becomes, look what they did with what life gave them. So let us go deeper into that beginning. Picture a child growing up in a world that already feels too small. Maybe the family is struggling. Maybe the streets are harsh. Maybe the school system is weak. Maybe the child is intelligent but does not fit in. Maybe there is loss in the home. Maybe there is conflict. Maybe there is pressure to stay quiet, stay small, stay realistic. But inside, there is movement. The child asks questions others do not ask. The child notices patterns. The child dreams beyond the limits around them. Sometimes this becomes rebellion. Sometimes it becomes creativity. Sometimes it becomes discipline. Sometimes it becomes empathy so deep that it hurts. But in many cases, the child is already becoming someone the world will later feel. Not because the future is clear, but because the inner world is already waking up. That waking up is often lonely. Most people around future influencers do not fully understand them at first. This is not always because people are bad. It is because unusual vision is hard to explain before results exist. Parents may want safety, teachers may want order, friends may want belonging, society may want obedience, but the future influencer often wants meaning, and meaning is disruptive. It can lead a person away from the expected path. It can make them ask dangerous questions. It can make them challenge rules, traditions, and limits. That challenge may begin softly, through thought, or loudly, through action. But either way, it creates friction, and friction is one of the first real tests in the life of anyone who will later matter in a big way. There is also the role of pain. We cannot ignore it. Pain is not a requirement for value, but it is present in many powerful lives. Some influential people knew loss early. A death in the family, a broken home, rejection, abuse, hunger, discrimination, war, migration, failure, illness, public shame. Pain cuts deep, but it also opens deep questions. Why is life like this? Why do people suffer? Why are some treated as less than others? Why does the system protect some and crush others? Why do lies travel faster than truth? Why do some ideas live while better ones die? These questions do not leave easily, and in people with unusual depth, they grow into purpose. Purpose is what begins to transform pain into power. Without purpose, pain only hurts. With purpose, pain begins to speak. It says, "This must change." It says, "I cannot watch this and remain the same." It says, "There has to be another way." This is why some of the most influential people became obsessed with solving problems. Not because problem-solving looked glamorous, but because the problem touched something personal in them. They were not acting from distance. They were acting from deep connection. They knew the cost of the issue because they had felt some version of it themselves. That connection gave their work intensity. And intensity, when matched with discipline, becomes force. But purpose alone is still not enough. Many people feel deeply, but never build anything lasting. What separates lasting influence from emotional reaction is structure. At some point, the person begins to train themselves. They read, they practice, they observe, they build skills, they learn how systems work. They learn language, timing, power, tools, people, money, persuasion, strategy, or craft. They begin to move from raw feeling to directed action. This stage is less romantic, but it is essential. The world remembers passion, but it is often shaped by preparation. Behind every major figure is a long season of learning that few people ever see. They may not yet be known, but they are becoming ready. That readiness is rarely comfortable. It often demands sacrifice, less sleep, fewer distractions, more failure, more correction, more humility, more patience. It asks a person to keep going while others enjoy easier paths. It asks them to stay focused without the guarantee of reward. This is where many dreams die, not because the dream was false, but because the person was not ready for the cost. The cost of becoming influential is almost always higher than outsiders imagine. It may cost comfort, popularity, peace, privacy, certainty, or even safety. And in the early stage, the cost comes before the reward. That is one of the hardest parts of the journey. Still, something keeps these people moving. Sometimes it is anger, sometimes love, sometimes hunger, sometimes belief, sometimes a desire to prove something, sometimes a need to survive, sometimes a quiet promise they made to themselves long ago. Whatever the source, they keep going. And as they keep going, life begins to shape them through repeated tests. Rejection teaches resilience. Failure teaches adaptation. Loss teaches depth. Injustice teaches urgency. Discipline teaches consistency. Solitude teaches self-trust. And over time, a person who once looked ordinary begins to develop unusual weight. Their words carry more truth. Their actions carry more focus. Their presence begins to affect others. Influence is starting to form, though the world may still not notice. There is a powerful lesson here for anyone watching. The beginning of a meaningful life often looks slow and hidden. It may even look like nothing is happening, but unseen growth is still growth. Roots grow in darkness before trees rise into the light. This is true in nature, and it is true in people. Many of history's most influential figures spent years in preparation before the world ever learned their names. Those years matter. They are not empty years. They are the years in which character is tested, beliefs are refined, and strength is built. They are the years when a person either gives up or becomes someone who can carry more. And carrying more is the heart of influence. To influence many, a person must first learn how to carry pressure, responsibility, and consequence. A weak inner life cannot hold large impact for long. That is why the early struggles are not random. They often prepare a person for the weight that comes later. The child who learned to survive instability may later endure the pressure of leadership. The young dreamer who faced rejection may later survive public criticism. The outsider who learned to stand alone may later become a voice others trust. The builder who solves small problems may later solve larger ones. The early years are often training, even when they feel like chaos. But let us be honest, not every influential person used their power for good. This is also part of the untold truth. Influence itself is neutral. It can heal or harm. It can free or control. It can inspire or destroy. Some influential people rose from pain and turned it into service. Others rose from pain and turned it into domination. Some used vision to lift humanity. Others used vision to manipulate it. That is why understanding the early life of powerful people is so important. It helps us see not only how influence is formed, but how character directs it. The same fire that creates greatness can also create danger if it is not guided by wisdom, compassion, and truth. So in this story, we are not only asking how the world's most influential people became powerful, we are also asking what shaped their inner compass. What values did they hold? What wounds did they carry? What fears drove them? What hopes softened them? What beliefs gave them direction? Because real influence is never only about success. It is about what a person chooses to do with power once they have it. And those choices often begin forming long before the public stage. This first section is about clearing away the illusion that history is made by polished heroes who always knew what they were doing. History is often made by imperfect people who kept moving through confusion with unusual determination. Some were kind, some were hard, some were broken, some were brilliant, some were both. But again and again, their early years reveal something important. Great influence begins with a different response to life. Where others accept, they question. Where others stop, they continue. Where others only suffer, they search for meaning. Where others fear rejection, they risk it. Where others wait for permission, they begin anyway. Maybe that is why the stories of influential people still matter so much. Not because we need more idols, but because we need more truth. We need to know that powerful lives are built, not handed over. We need to know that struggle does not automatically mean the end. We need to know that hidden seasons are not wasted seasons. We need to know that being doubted early does not disqualify anyone from making a difference later. And we need to know that the world is often changed by people who were once overlooked. So before we move into the deeper life stories ahead, hold on to this first lesson. The beginning is never just the beginning. It is a map in seed form. It contains the wounds, questions, desires, and tensions that may later shape a whole life. The child, the student, the worker, the outsider, the dreamer, the struggler, the rebel, the observer, the builder, the wounded heart, the curious mind, the lonely soul, the relentless spirit. All of them may be living inside one future force, and the world may not notice yet. But history often starts in places no one is watching. The untold life story of the world's most influential people begins here. In the quiet, in the pressure, in the first questions, in the private pain, in the refusal to stay small, in the long season before recognition, in the hard choice to keep going. And if there is one reason you should keep watching this journey, it is this. Once you understand how influence really begins, you stop seeing greatness as luck. You begin to see it as a pattern of thought, a pattern of endurance, a pattern of response, and patterns can be learned. Which means the distance between ordinary and extraordinary may not be as wide as it first appears. The world's most influential people were not dropped from the sky. They were formed, tested, pressed, shaped, and slowly, through choices that looked small at the time, they became impossible to ignore. And maybe that is the most powerful truth of all. The early stage of a life does not need applause to matter. It only needs meaning. It only needs one person willing to carry the question, the burden, the dream, or the mission long enough for it to become real, long enough for skill to grow, long enough for character to deepen, long enough for fear to lose control, long enough for vision to become action, long enough for a private struggle to become a public force. That is how the journey starts. Quietly, humanly, painfully, but powerfully. So as we move forward from here, remember this feeling. Remember this hidden beginning. Because the next time you hear the name of a person who changed the world, do not only think of the final image. Think of the unseen child. Think of the confused young adult. Think of the nights of doubt. Think of the pressure. Think of the rejection. Think of the private voice that kept saying, "Keep going." That voice may be the real birthplace of influence. And in the next part of this story, we will begin to see how that hidden voice turned ordinary lives into names the world could never forget. Have you ever noticed how the world usually meets powerful people only after they have already become powerful? By the time most names reach us, the rough parts are gone. The story has been cleaned. The edges have been cut away. We are shown the victory, not the weight that came before it. But if we want to understand how the world's most influential people were truly made, then we have to go back further. We have to return to the years when they had no title, no crowd, no stage, and often no clear path. Because the second great truth in almost every powerful life is this. Before they learned how to influence the world, they were first shaped by the world that surrounded them, and that world was often hard, unstable, unfair, or deeply confusing. The early years of an influential person are rarely simple. Even when a childhood looks calm from the outside, there is often an inner storm building beneath the surface. Some children grow up surrounded by rules that feel too tight. Some grow up around fear that never speaks its name. Some grow up watching adults struggle, fail, break, or pretend. Some grow up loved but misunderstood. Some grow up hungry for approval. Some grow up angry at injustice before they even know the word injustice. And some grow up with a strange sense that they were meant to do more than the life placed in front of them. That feeling can be a gift, but it can also feel like a burden, because a child who senses more is often a child who becomes restless early. Restlessness is one of the first hidden signs of future influence. Not empty restlessness, not the kind that only wants noise or attention, but the deeper kind. The kind that cannot accept the world at surface level. The kind that keeps asking why. Why are things done this way? Why do some people have everything while others have almost nothing? Why do lies get protected? Why do weak systems remain in power? Why do people settle for lives that make them feel small? Why does pain repeat itself from one generation to the next? Many influential people began as children who noticed these cracks before others did. They were often sensitive, curious, observant, and hard to satisfy with easy answers. That kind of child can look difficult, but sometimes difficulty is only the early shape of depth. The world does not always know what to do with depth in a young person. Families may call it stubbornness. Teachers may call it distraction. Friends may call it being strange. Communities may call it rebellion. But in many cases, what they are seeing is a mind that is already wrestling with bigger questions. A future leader may seem too serious too early. A future creator may seem lost in imagination. A future reformer may seem angry, emotional, or intense. A future entrepreneur may seem obsessed with building, selling, or trying ideas that do not yet make sense. A future writer may seem quiet and always watching. A future speaker may seem like someone who argues too much. These traits can be annoying to the people around them, but history has often been shaped by people who were inconvenient long before they were admired. Let us not rush past that. Many of the world's most influential people were not easy to live with in their younger years. Some questioned authority too much. Some could not stop pushing boundaries. Some were impatient. Some were proud. Some felt deeply misunderstood. Some were full of energy with nowhere to direct it. Some changed from one idea to another because they were still discovering their true path. Some were wounded and reacted from that pain. This matters because we often imagine early greatness as clean and noble. It usually is not. It is often messy, raw, unsettled, full of contradictions. The very intensity that later helps a person reshape the world can first appear as instability. The challenge is whether that intensity gets wasted, broken, or directed. This is where environment becomes important. No child grows in a vacuum. Every future influencer is shaped by the voices, limits, expectations, and examples around them. Some grow up in homes where discipline is strong but warmth is weak. Some grow up with love but little structure. Some are told they can become anything. Others are told to know their place. Some are raised among books, debate, and possibility. Others are raised inside fear, poverty, conflict, or silence. These conditions do not fully decide a life, but they do leave powerful marks. A child raised in fear may spend adulthood trying to create control. A child raised in chaos may hunger for order. A child raised in shame may chase achievement. A child raised in comfort may still feel empty and start seeking purpose beyond material ease. The outer world enters the inner world early, and from there it begins shaping desire. Desire is one of the strongest hidden forces in the life stories of influential people. Before there is strategy, there is desire. A desire to escape, a desire to prove, a desire to heal, a desire to build, a desire to be seen, a desire to fix something, a desire to rise beyond the limits of birth, a desire to make meaning out of pain, a desire to be remembered, a desire to protect others from what one has suffered. Desire is not always pure. Sometimes it starts in wounded places. Sometimes it starts in pride. Sometimes it starts in loneliness. But if it is refined over time, it can become incredibly powerful. It can give a person energy that lasts longer than comfort ever could. One child sees a broken system and becomes curious. Another sees the same system and becomes numb. One child feels rejection and begins shrinking. Another feels rejection and quietly starts preparing to outgrow every room that ever made them feel small. One child is told they will never matter and accepts it. Another hears those same words and stores them like fuel. This difference in response is one of the great mysteries of human life. Why do certain people take hardship and turn it into force? Why do certain wounds deepen a person while others destroy them? There is no single answer, but one pattern appears again and again. Influential people often develop an unusual relationship with hardship. They do not always welcome it. They do not always handle it perfectly. But over time, they stop seeing hardship only as pain and begin seeing it as information. Hardship teaches them how the world works. It teaches them what must be changed. It teaches them what they cannot become. And in many cases, it gives them their first real mission. That mission is rarely clear in childhood. It often begins as a feeling before it becomes a direction. A child may not yet say, "I will become a reformer," or "I will build a company," or "I will challenge a nation," or "I will write ideas that outlive me." Instead, the child feels something like this. Something is wrong. Something is possible. Something must change. Something inside me refuses to accept the limits around me. That feeling may sleep for years. It may get buried under survival, school, work, fear, or social pressure. But it does not fully die. And when life hits the right pressure points later, it begins to rise again. Most people never see that hidden rise because it often happens slowly. We think major lives change through one dramatic event, but that is only part of the truth. More often, a person is quietly being formed over many years before the world notices any difference. The child who learns to observe people may later become a powerful speaker because they understand human emotion. The teenager who feels excluded may later build a movement because they know what it means to stand outside the gate. The young worker who experiences hunger may later challenge an entire economic system because they know the cost of struggle. The student who cannot stop questioning accepted ideas may later produce a new way of thinking. The early years are not random background. They are the workshop where future influence is being built piece by piece. And yet there is pain in being formed this way. Let us be honest about that. It is not romantic to grow up feeling out of place. It is not beautiful to watch your family suffer. It is not inspiring in the moment to feel invisible, powerless, ashamed, poor, afraid, or different. Many influential people spent their early years carrying burdens they did not choose. Some felt the weight of expectation. Some felt the pressure of survival. Some grew up in societies where their race, class, gender, or background limited what they were allowed to dream. Some watched the people they loved accept lives of quiet defeat. Some saw intelligence ignored. Some saw cruelty rewarded. These things leave scars, but in certain people, scars become more than damage. They become memory with direction. Memory with direction is powerful because it keeps the past from being wasted. An ordinary painful memory says, "This hurt me." A directional memory says, "This hurt me, and I need to understand what to do with it." That difference is huge. The second kind of memory creates movement. It leads a person to study more, practice more, think more, refuse more, and endure more. It creates a private conversation between pain and purpose. And that private conversation often shapes the whole future. Think about how many influential lives began with some form of displacement. Not always physical displacement, though that matters too. Sometimes the displacement is emotional. A person does not feel fully at home in their environment. They do not think like the people around them. They do not want what others want. They feel like they are standing just slightly outside the culture they belong to. This distance can feel painful, but it also offers perspective. Outsiders often see systems more clearly because they are not fully asleep inside them. They notice the rules everyone else accepts without question. They see weakness in structures others call normal. They feel the cost of exclusion and therefore understand how power works. Many world-changing people first learned this from the outside. Being on the outside teaches strange lessons. It teaches self-observation. It teaches restraint. It teaches how to read a room before speaking. It teaches how groups behave. It teaches the cost of status. It teaches the way people protect comfort over truth. It teaches what power sounds like when it speaks politely. It teaches how easy it is for a society to ignore suffering until someone forces it to look. These lessons do not feel exciting when a person is young. They often feel lonely. But later, they become part of the reason an individual can move people so deeply. The person who has stood outside often understands human need in a way those born inside power never fully do. There is another lesson early life teaches influential people. It teaches them what they fear most. This matters more than many realize. A child who fears poverty may later become obsessed with building security, wealth, or control. A child who fears humiliation may later chase mastery so hard that failure becomes unbearable. A child who fears invisibility may seek impact so great that the whole world has to notice. A child who fears chaos may become highly disciplined or deeply controlling. These fears do not disappear just because a person becomes successful. In fact, many successful people are still being driven by early fears. The outer form changes, but the inner pressure remains. This is why powerful people can still act from wounds long after they have won outwardly. Influence does not erase history. It often reveals how deeply history still lives inside a person. That is why the untold story matters. If we only watch achievements, we misunderstand motive. We may think a person is driven by pure ambition when they are actually being chased by old shame. We may think a person is bold because they are fearless, when in fact they are terrified of becoming powerless again. We may think a person is generous only because they are noble, when part of their generosity may come from remembering what lack feels like. Real human stories are complex. The strongest lives are almost always driven by a mix of noble desire and personal wound. That does not make them fake, it makes them human. And if we ignore that human complexity, we learn the wrong lessons from them. By the time many influential people reach youth or early adulthood, the pressure inside them becomes harder to ignore. Childhood observation turns into action. Quiet sensitivity turns into stronger opinion. Hidden desire turns into experiments. This is often the stage where a person begins trying to shape their life instead of only reacting to it. They take risks. They test ideas. They rebel, create, move, speak, challenge, study, or build. Some enter politics. Some enter business. Some turn to faith. Some turn to art. Some turn to activism. Some turn to scholarship. Some simply begin with work and slowly discover that their work has larger meaning. At this point, the path may still look messy and uncertain, but something important has changed. The person is no longer only being shaped by life. They are beginning to shape a response. That response is rarely smooth. The world resists people who grow beyond what it expected from them. Families may feel threatened when one member begins changing too much. Friends may not understand new discipline. Institutions may punish original thinking. Systems may try to push the person back into old roles. This is why the next phase in many influential lives involves conflict. Not just inner conflict, but outer conflict. The person starts bumping into real limits. Doors close. People dismiss them. Their ideas fail. Their first attempts may be weak, clumsy, or embarrassing. Their confidence may break. They may question themselves deeply. But this part is necessary. It teaches whether a person is in love with an image of greatness or committed to the actual work of becoming capable. Capability is born in friction. A dream alone can excite a person for a short time, but only pressure can test whether the dream has roots. Many people want the feeling of being important. Fewer people want the training required to become effective. The future influencers who survive this stage are usually the ones who develop the ability to learn from pain instead of only reacting to it. A failed speech teaches them how to speak better. A rejected plan teaches them strategy. A business loss teaches them how the market really works. Public humiliation teaches them control. Betrayal teaches them caution. Opposition teaches them how power defends itself. Each wound becomes a teacher if the person is willing to learn. Still, learning hurts. There is no noble way to make that sound easy. It hurts to fail when you care deeply. It hurts to be unseen when you know you have something to give. It hurts to work hard and get little in return. It hurts to be mocked for something that later proves true. It hurts to keep building while those around you choose easier lives and seem happier. Many influential people walked through this pain for years. They were not constantly inspired. They were not always confident. They often felt tired, doubtful, and alone. But they kept going long enough for their effort to harden into skill and their skill to become impact. This long middle stage is often where future greatness is either born or buried. It is not glamorous enough to attract praise. It is too difficult to feel romantic. It is simply hard, repeated work done under uncertainty. But this is where so much is decided. A person learns whether they can keep working when no one cares. Whether they can stay loyal to truth when lies are easier, whether they can survive rejection without becoming bitter, whether they can remain teachable even while being resisted, whether they can protect their inner life from the noise around them. In other words, they learn whether they can become strong without becoming empty. That last part matters deeply. Many people gain skill but lose soul. They become effective but not wise, influential but not grounded, powerful but hollow. The world has been shaped by such people too, and not always for the better. So one of the hidden battles in the life story of powerful figures is not just how to rise, but how to rise without being consumed by the very forces they fight. A child who hates injustice may become ruthless. A young dreamer who wants freedom may become controlling. A hungry builder may become obsessed. A wounded outsider may seek revenge instead of truth. The early years plant not only strengths, but dangers. And the rest of life is often a struggle over which seeds will grow faster. This is why mentors, books, examples, and turning point relationships matter so much in the hidden years. Very few influential people are formed completely alone. Even the strongest individualists are shaped by teachers, rivals, parents, writers, traditions, friends, enemies, or moments of guidance that redirect them. A timely idea can save years of confusion. A wise correction can stop a gifted person from destroying themselves. A strong example can show what courage looks like in practice. A trusted voice can say, "You are not crazy, keep going." These influences may not get much attention in public stories, but they can alter an entire destiny. One conversation can deepen conviction. One betrayal can sharpen vision. One book can give language to a pain a person has felt for years. One loss can break illusion and force maturity. Maturity itself is a major turning point in influential lives. At some stage, raw emotion must grow into disciplined purpose. The person realizes that anger alone is not enough. Talent alone is not enough. Vision alone is not enough. They must become someone who can carry responsibility. This often means learning patience, strategy, timing, and self-control. It means understanding people, not just ideas. It means accepting that changing the world is slower than complaining about it. It means staying committed when progress is invisible. It means serving something larger than ego. This is difficult work because ego wants quick proof. Purpose accepts long obedience. And this is where many figures begin to separate from the crowd. Most people want results before responsibility, but influential people often accept responsibility before results arrive. They begin acting like caretakers of a mission before the mission has produced visible success. They organize when nothing is certain. They study deeply before anyone asks them to. They keep practicing even after failure. They remain loyal to the work during boring seasons. They choose growth over image again and again. This does not make them superhuman. It simply means they are governed by something stronger than mood. Mood is one of the great killers of unfinished potential. If a person only moves when they feel inspired, they will never build something great. Many influential people learned this early. Their lives forced them to continue through disappointment, fatigue, fear, and silence. They learned to act without emotional reward. This is one reason their work later feels powerful. It was built under weight. It was tested long before it was praised. A speech that changes history may stand on years of private reading and repeated failure. A company that reshapes an industry may stand on years of small experiments and near collapse. A movement that awakens a nation may stand on years of ignored warnings and hidden organizing. Nothing important appears from nowhere. The longer we study powerful lives, the clearer one truth becomes. The beginning of influence is rarely visible because it happens in the invisible parts of a person first. It happens in how they interpret pain, in how they respond to exclusion, in what they do with their questions, in whether they turn resentment into discipline or let it poison them, in whether they keep learning when the world gives them little reason to hope. These inner decisions do not make headlines, but they shape all future headlines. Let us imagine, then, the young version of one of these world-changing figures, even without naming them yet. Maybe they are sitting in a small room late at night, listening to the sound of a struggling home, feeling both love and frustration. Maybe they are walking through a city that teaches them how unequal life can be. Maybe they are reading in secret because books are the only place where they feel larger than their circumstances. Maybe they are working while carrying a private ambition they cannot fully explain. Maybe they are already noticing that the world rewards obedience more than truth. Maybe they are starting to realize that if they want a different future, they will have to create one rather than wait for it. In that quiet realization, influence begins to tighten into form. Form matters because vague desire does not change history. Desire must become shape. Shape can be a discipline, a voice, a craft, a method, a message, a structure, a business, a movement, or an idea powerful enough to survive the person who first spoke it. But shape takes time. It requires repetition, correction, and endurance. This is why early obscurity is so important. Obscurity gives a person room to fail without the whole world watching. It gives space to experiment. It allows hidden growth. The problem is that obscurity feels terrible when you are living inside it. It feels like invisibility. It feels like delay. It feels like life is passing while nothing happens. But for many influential people, obscurity was not punishment. It was preparation. Preparation often looks boring from the outside. This is one of the great misunderstandings of success. People love dramatic endings, but powerful lives are usually built through simple, repeated acts. Reading daily, thinking deeply, working consistently, learning from mistakes, watching carefully, trying again, returning after defeat. These habits seem small, but they create the capacity to hold larger impact later. The person who cannot master small routines rarely manages large responsibility well. That is why the untold life story is full of ordinary-looking days. Those days are where stamina is built. And stamina, more than brilliance alone, often decides who lasts. Lasting influence requires more than one moment. It requires the ability to continue when the first breakthrough fades. This is another reason early formation matters. A person shaped by deep purpose can continue beyond applause. A person shaped only by attention becomes weak when attention moves away. Many influential people were trained by long years without applause, which is why applause later did not fully control them. They had already learned how to exist without it. That is rare. And because it is rare, it becomes powerful. But even as strength grows, the inner life remains fragile in some ways. Influential people are still people. They still carry doubt. They still have moments when the old wounds speak. They still feel fear when stepping into larger responsibility. They may look bold to the public while privately wondering whether they can hold the weight ahead. This should not surprise us. Big influence means bigger consequence. A person may fear failing the mission, they may fear becoming what they hate, they may fear losing themselves, they may fear the backlash that comes with truth. These fears do not mean they are weak, they mean the stakes are real. The most dangerous moment in a rising life is often not the first failure. It is the first serious success. Success can confuse motive. It can flatter ego. It can attract shallow followers. It can tempt a person to think they have arrived when they have only begun. Some influential people are destroyed here, others deepen. The ones who deepen are often those whose early years taught them humility through pain. They remember struggle. They remember uncertainty. They remember what the mission cost before it had a name. That memory can keep them grounded, or at least it can give them a chance to stay grounded if they choose wisely. We are still in the early movement of these powerful lives, but already certain patterns have become clear. First, influential people are often marked early by unusual sensitivity, restlessness, and depth. Second, they are shaped by the environment around them, but not fully controlled by it. Third, pain often becomes a teacher, though it can also become a danger. Fourth, the hidden years matter more than the public sees. Fifth, desire must grow into discipline if it is to become real force. Sixth, character directs whether influence heals or harms. These truths repeat in life after life, even though the outer details change. And perhaps that is what makes these stories useful for us. We may not all become world famous. We may not all lead nations, build empires, write history, or move millions. But the deeper pattern still applies. Every life contains moments where pain can become meaning or poison. Every person faces hidden seasons where character is being formed without applause. Every soul meets the question of whether it will stay small in order to stay safe. The lives of influential people matter not only because they are rare, but because they reveal the laws of becoming. They show what happens when a human being keeps responding to life with depth, courage, discipline, and refusal. So the next time you look at someone who changed the world, remember that the world did not meet them at the beginning. The beginning may have looked unimpressive. It may have looked painful. It may have looked like a confused child, a restless student, a rejected worker, a poor dreamer, a wounded outsider, or a lonely mind asking questions no one wanted to hear. It may have looked like weakness. It may have looked like too much intensity. It may have looked like failure. But inside that hidden beginning, something was already gathering shape. And that is where this section leaves us. Not at the finish line, but at the threshold where inner formation starts pushing outward. The child has become more aware. The wound has become a question. The question has become desire. The desire has begun turning into discipline. The person is no longer only surviving their world. They are beginning to prepare a response to it. They do not yet know how large that response will become. They may not even know their true path yet, but something irreversible has started. The inner life has awakened. The old limits no longer feel final. The private fire is becoming harder to hide. And in the next part of this journey, we will step into the moments when that hidden fire begins to face real opposition, real risk, and the first true turning points that transform unknown people into forces the world can feel. What happens when a private fire finally meets the real world? What happens when a person who has spent years thinking, feeling, learning, and preparing is forced to test that inner strength against real resistance? This is where hidden potential becomes dangerous, not only to the person carrying it, but to the systems, habits, and powers that depend on things staying the same. The third stage in the untold life story of the world's most influential people is often the stage of collision. Until now, the struggle has mostly been inside. The child became observant. The young person became restless. Pain became purpose. Desire became discipline. But now the deeper question arrives. Can that private vision survive contact with reality? Because the truth is simple. Many people carry bold ideas in their minds. Fewer can protect those ideas once the world pushes back. This stage is rarely clean. In fact, it may be the messiest part of the whole journey. The person now begins to act in ways that make their inner world visible. They speak up. They challenge a rule. They launch a project. They publish a thought. They start a movement. They refuse to obey. They leave the safe path. They choose a direction that others call foolish. And the moment they do, resistance begins to take shape. Up to this point, their dream may have felt personal. Now it becomes public. And once something becomes public, it can be judged, mocked, attacked, copied, feared, or crushed. This is why many powerful lives bend sharply at this stage. Some rise through it. Some break under it. Some disappear. Some return later stronger than before. But no one leaves this phase unchanged. The first form of resistance usually comes from the people closest to them. This is one of the hardest truths for dreamers and changemakers to accept. Strangers may attack later, but loved ones often resist first. A family that once worried in silence may now speak directly. Friends may begin asking hard questions. Why are you doing this? Why can't you be normal? Why risk everything? Why leave a stable life? Why speak about things that bring trouble? Why refuse the path everyone else accepts? Sometimes these questions come from love. Sometimes they come from fear. Sometimes they come from jealousy. Sometimes they come from the simple discomfort people feel when someone near them changes too much. But whatever the reason, these moments cut deep. It hurts more when doubt comes from people whose approval once mattered most. Many influential people face this kind of early rejection. They were seen as unrealistic, proud, irresponsible, too ambitious, too emotional, too rebellious, too obsessed, too difficult, or simply too different. And for a moment, the criticism often lands. The future influencer may question everything. Maybe they are foolish, maybe they are selfish, maybe they are chasing a fantasy, maybe they are risking too much. These thoughts are not small. They can stop a life before it fully begins. This is why the third stage matters so much. It forces a person to decide which voice will lead them. The voice of fear around them, or the voice of conviction within them. That decision is rarely made once. It must be made again and again, often in pain. Pain becomes sharper here because the cost of action becomes real. Until now, the person could still hold both worlds at once. They could imagine a different future while still staying near the safety of the old one. But once they begin to act, they cannot fully hide impossibility anymore. Reality asks for proof. Action creates consequence. A person may lose money, lose reputation, lose comfort, lose relationships, lose social approval, lose the simple peace of fitting in. The dream is no longer just inspiring. It is expensive. And one of the great hidden truths of influential lives is that real change usually begins when a person accepts a cost that others refuse to pay. That cost can take many forms. For one person, it is financial risk. They leave a steady job to pursue an idea that looks uncertain. For another, it is social risk. They say something true in a room that rewards silence. For another, it is moral risk. They stand against a system that can punish them. For another, it is emotional risk. They choose a path that may isolate them for years. For another, it is physical risk. They step into conflict that could damage their body or even end their life. Power rarely gives way easily. Systems do not enjoy being questioned. Audiences do not always reward honesty. Markets do not automatically care about vision. And people do not always welcome being awakened. That is why the birth of influence is often tied to sacrifice. At this stage, a person begins to learn a hard lesson. Passion alone cannot carry them. Passion may get them started, but it is not enough to keep them steady when results are weak, pressure is high, and the world seems unmoved. Something deeper is required. That deeper thing is commitment. Commitment is less exciting than passion, but more powerful. Passion says, I feel alive doing this. Commitment says, I will continue even when I do not feel alive. Passion burns bright. Commitment keeps burning in the dark. Many influential people only discovered the strength of commitment after passion was tested and found too weak on its own. This testing often comes through failure, not one failure, but many. Failure is almost never missing from the hidden life story of someone who later shapes the world. Plans fail, messages fail, products fail, early leadership fails, timing fails, trust is broken, effort brings little reward. A person may pour months or years into something only to see it collapse or go unnoticed. And in these moments, something serious happens. The person discovers whether they are attached to the mission or only attached to quick success. These are not the same thing. People attached only to quick success often quit once the pain becomes too great. People attached to the mission may grieve deeply, may even fall apart for a season, but eventually they rise and ask a better question. Not, why didn't this make me successful? But what is this failure trying to teach me? That question changes everything. Failure becomes different once it becomes a teacher. It is still painful, it still bruises the ego, it still drains energy, but it stops being meaningless. It starts becoming information. This speech failed because the timing was wrong. This plan failed because the structure was weak. This message failed because people were not ready. This company failed because the product solved the wrong problem. This movement stalled because the leader did not yet understand human fear. This reform attempt failed because power defended itself faster than expected. Every failure contains data, and the most influential people are often those who become excellent students of their own defeat. Still, no one learns this easily. In the moment of failure, the heart does not feel calm and wise. It feels embarrassed, angry, tired, exposed, and small. It may feel like all the critics were right. It may feel like the dream was a mistake. It may feel like time is running out. It may feel like the person has wasted their life. This emotional storm is one of the most dangerous moments in the journey. Because failure does not only test ability, it tests identity. If a person has tied their whole worth to success, failure can destroy them from within. But if they can separate their value from the result, then failure can become painful growth instead of final collapse. Many influential lives depended on learning this distinction. The distinction is simple, but hard to live. I failed is not the same as I am a failure. A lost battle is not the same as a lost calling. A rejected idea is not proof of a worthless mind. A slow beginning is not proof of a weak future. The people who eventually changed the world often had to teach themselves this truth in harsh ways. They had to keep going while carrying the public evidence of defeat. They had to rebuild while others whispered that they were finished. They had to return after humiliation. They had to face rooms where people remembered their earlier mistakes. That takes more than talent. It takes deep resilience. Resilience is one of the central forces in this third stage. But resilience is often misunderstood. It does not mean a person never feels hurt. It does not mean they never doubt themselves. It does not mean they stay confident every day. Real resilience is not loud. It is the ability to come back. It is the decision to continue after the heart has been broken open. It is the refusal to let pain make the final choice. The most influential people were often not the most naturally gifted in every room. They were the ones who could absorb more disappointment without surrendering the mission. They could bend without fully breaking, and even when they broke, they found some way to return. Return is one of the most powerful words in the hidden story of influence. Return after rejection, return after betrayal, return after poverty, return after loss, return after public failure, return after exhaustion, return after everyone thought the story was over. History is full of people whose real greatness began not with their first attempt, but with their first meaningful return. Because the return changes a person. The first attempt may still carry innocence. The return carries knowledge. The first attempt may be driven by hope alone. The return is driven by something stronger. It is driven by tested purpose. A person who returns after deep disappointment has often become harder to distract, harder to flatter, and harder to stop. During this stage, another truth begins to emerge. Influence is not built only through success. It is built through how a person handles opposition. Anyone can look wise when things go smoothly. Character becomes visible when pressure rises. Does the person become cruel when resisted? Do they lie to protect their image? Do they blame everyone else? Do they shrink into self-pity? Or do they become more thoughtful, more strategic, more disciplined, and more honest? This is where inner quality begins shaping outer legacy. Two people may face the same hardship. One becomes bitter. The other becomes sharper. One becomes obsessed with revenge. The other becomes committed to truth. One turns pain into control. The other turns pain into service. The difference between these responses can alter the fate of nations, companies, movements, and generations. There is also the question of timing. Many future influencers begin acting before the world is ready for them. That does not mean they are wrong. It means reality often moves slower than vision. A person may see a truth before the culture can absorb it. They may design a solution before the market understands the problem. They may demand justice before society has developed the moral courage to listen. This mismatch between vision and timing can create intense frustration. The person knows something important is real, but every visible result says otherwise. It is like seeing the outline of a new world while everyone else still lives inside the old one. This gap can drive a person into deeper discipline or deeper despair. Sometimes both. Despair is part of the journey more often than public stories admit. Influential people are often described as determined, driven, and visionary, which may be true. But many also pass through periods of real despair. They were tired of fighting, tired of losing, tired of being misunderstood, tired of carrying weight no one else seemed willing to hold, tired of the slow pace of change, tired of their own mistakes. Some came close to quitting. Some did quit for a time. Some disappeared into silence. Some fell into grief, doubt, or loneliness so deep that the mission itself began to feel like a burden. This is not weakness. It is the natural cost of carrying something heavy for a long time. And yet, even despair can become part of the shaping process. It burns away illusion. It shows a person what is false in them. It forces them to ask whether they really love the mission or only love the image of being the one who completes it. That question humbles many people, and humility, though painful, can become a great strength. At first, many rising figures think their journey is only about proving they can win. Over time, the deeper ones discover that the real task is larger than proving themselves. It is about becoming useful to something bigger than themselves. This change is subtle but powerful. A person shifts from, I must succeed, to, this work must live, whether or not I get all the credit. That shift can free them from ego and make their influence stronger. It can also make them more dangerous to unjust systems, because they are no longer driven by approval. A person who needs applause can be controlled. A person who serves a mission beyond applause becomes much harder to contain. But this stage also reveals who a person is becoming morally. When resistance increases, some people cut corners. They manipulate. They hide truth. They use others. They let hunger turn into greed. They let righteous anger turn into cruelty. Many influential people faced this temptation. Some failed it. Some resisted it. This matters because the journey toward influence does not automatically make a person good. It only makes them more visible and more powerful. Whatever is growing in the inner life becomes larger when influence expands. If bitterness grows there, influence magnifies bitterness. If wisdom grows there, influence magnifies wisdom. If pride grows there, influence magnifies pride. This is why the hidden battles of character matter more than most people realize. Public power often reveals private habits. There is a moment in many powerful lives when the person begins to understand the rules of the game they are in. Up to this point, they may have been acting with raw courage, instinct, and hunger. But now they start to see more clearly how systems protect themselves. They learn how institutions work. They learn how money flows. They learn how public opinion moves. They learn how authority reacts to threat. They learn how narratives are shaped. They learn how quickly people can be influenced by fear, hope, status, and identity. This knowledge is important because passion without strategy can spend itself too early. The maturing influencer begins to realize that if they want to create lasting change, they must not only feel deeply, they must think deeply. Thinking deeply does not mean becoming cold, it means becoming effective. A reformer learns that anger must be translated into clear action. A builder learns that ideas must become systems. A speaker learns that truth must be communicated in a form people can hear. A leader learns that courage must be matched with timing. A writer learns that words do not only express thought, they shape worlds. A business founder learns that vision must survive the numbers. An activist learns that moral fire must outlast the headlines. This is the stage where a person moves from being only passionate to being dangerous in a more serious way. They are no longer just reacting to what hurts them. They are learning how to move reality. Moving reality is hard because reality is heavy. People have habits, systems have memory, power has defenders, fear has deep roots. This is why so many first attempts at change seem small compared to the size of the problem. And yet these first attempts matter. The first speech may not change the nation, but it teaches the speaker how truth lands. The first product may not reshape the market, but it teaches the builder what people actually need. The first protest may not break the system, but it teaches the movement what resistance looks like. The first book may not become famous, but it teaches the writer how to name what others feel. The first failure is often the start of real education. Education in this stage is not only external, it is internal too. The person begins seeing themselves more honestly. They notice their own vanity, impatience, weakness, fear, arrogance, and need for control. Or perhaps they notice their lack of courage, their tendency to hide, their habit of avoiding conflict, or their addiction to approval. These discoveries can feel painful, even humiliating. But they are necessary. A person cannot hold large influence safely if they do not know what is broken in them. Self-ignorance becomes dangerous once power grows. This is why the hidden years of opposition are sometimes a gift, though they do not feel like one. Opposition forces self-confrontation. It shows a person what pressure pulls out of them. Pressure may reveal greatness, but it also reveals fault lines. Some future influencers learn they are more fragile than they thought. Others learn they are stronger. Some discover they are too easily distracted by comfort. Others discover they can live with very little if the mission feels true. Some realize they care too much about being liked. Others realize they were secretly more prepared for loneliness than they imagined. These discoveries reshape the path ahead. They help a person understand what kind of battle they are actually built for. Battle is the right word, though not every battle looks like war. Some battles are social, some are intellectual, some are moral, some are spiritual, some are economic, some are deeply personal. But in this third stage, the influential person begins to understand that they are not only pursuing a dream, they are entering conflict. Something in the world opposes what they carry. It may be a law, a norm, a business model, a tradition, a lie, a fear, an empire, a gatekeeping group, or simply the deep human tendency to resist difficult truth. Whatever the form, the conflict becomes unavoidable. And once the conflict becomes unavoidable, courage must change shape. Early courage is often emotional. It says, I care enough to begin. Mature courage says, I care enough to continue even when this costs me more than I expected. That is a different kind of strength. It is slower, less dramatic, more steady. It is not fueled by a moment. It is fueled by a settled decision. Many world-changing lives were built not on one bold act, but on years of repeated courage that no single headline could capture. This is why the public often misunderstands influence. We see the breakthrough moment and call it genius, bravery, or destiny. But we do not see the hundreds of invisible decisions beneath it. The decision to study one more hour, the decision to speak again after being ignored, the decision to revise after failure, the decision to walk back into the room where shame once lived, the decision to keep serving when applause was absent. The decision to remain honest when lying would have been easier. These decisions seem small, but they are the muscles of becoming. Without them, no great life stands for long. At some point in this stage, small signs of impact usually begin to appear. Not full victory, but signals. A few people start listening. A first follower arrives. A first customer believes. A first article is noticed. A first audience responds. A small group gathers. A mentor sees potential. An enemy begins paying attention. These signs matter. They do not remove the difficulty, but they confirm that the work is touching reality. And yet they also create new danger. Early recognition can tempt a person to become satisfied too soon, or to shape themselves around applause instead of truth. The wiser figures learn to accept encouragement without becoming dependent on it. Dependence on applause can destroy the mission because applause is unstable. Crowds change quickly. Trends move. Support rises and falls. A person who lets the crowd decide their direction will become weak at the exact moment deeper courage is needed. Many influential people had to learn how to walk with both praise and criticism without being owned by either. That skill often began in this third stage, because once the person becomes even slightly visible, interpretation begins. Supporters project onto them. Critics distort them. Friends misunderstand them. Enemies define them unfairly. The person now has to carry not only their actual self, but also the many false versions others create of them. That weight can be exhausting. Exhaustion is real here, not poetic exhaustion. Real exhaustion. The kind that affects the body, sleep, mind, and relationships. The kind that makes a person question whether the cost is worth it. Many influential people lived through long seasons where the mission drained them nearly to the edge. They worked while grieving, spoke while tired, built while broke, organized while threatened, led while lonely, learned while ashamed. This is part of why their later impact carries weight. It was paid for in private long before it was recognized in public. Still, impact alone does not guarantee meaning. Some people achieve visible progress and lose themselves in the process. Others grow more whole as they rise. The difference often comes back to what the struggle is doing inside them. Is it making them clearer or more corrupted? Is it teaching patience or feeding ego? Is it deepening compassion or sharpening cruelty? The hidden battle is never only about winning outside. It is about who the person is becoming while trying to win. That is the untold part most biographies rush past. They tell us what happened. They do not always tell us what it cost inside. Inside, a war is often being fought between the old self and the forming self. The old self wants safety, approval, quick comfort, revenge, and easy proof. The forming self wants truth, depth, courage, patience, and long obedience. These two selves can live inside the same person for years. Sometimes the old self wins for a season. Sometimes the forming self grows stronger through pain. The influential lives that matter most are often those where the deeper self slowly takes authority. Not perfectly, not all at once, but enough that the person begins to live from purpose more than fear. Purpose does not remove fear, but it reorders it. The person may still fear failure, rejection, loneliness, or loss, but they begin fearing a different thing more. They fear wasting the mission. They fear becoming false. They fear living smaller than truth demands. They fear betraying what life has taught them. This new fear can be healthy. It keeps them moving when comfort calls them back. It reminds them that the cost of retreat may become greater than the cost of courage. And so the third stage becomes a furnace. The person is being heated from all sides, by opposition, by failure, by pressure, by timing, by uncertainty, by the slow pace of growth, by the discovery of their own weakness, by the temptation to quit, by the first taste of impact, by the burden of expectation. All of this heat could destroy them, but in the lives that later change the world, the heat often does something else. It hardens conviction. It clarifies motive. It sharpens strategy. It deepens endurance. It reveals what cannot be burned away. What cannot be burned away becomes the core. And once a person reaches that core, something changes. They may still look vulnerable from the outside. They may still lack resources, power, or recognition. But inwardly, they have crossed a line. They now know what they are willing to suffer for. They know what they cannot unknow. They know what kind of life would feel like betrayal. That knowledge is powerful. A person who knows this becomes very difficult to control. This is the edge where unknown people begin turning into real forces. Not because they have already won, but because they can no longer be fully turned back into who they were before the fire. They have seen too much, learned too much, paid too much. The old life no longer fits. Even if they fail again, they will fail differently now. More aware, more formed, more dangerous to the lies they once lived under. And that is why the next stage matters so much. Because once conviction survives collision, the person is ready for something even more difficult than early opposition. They are ready for the turning point, the moment when private struggle, tested character, real sacrifice, and growing skill combine into a breakthrough that shifts not only the person's future, but the future of many others as well. That is where we are heading next, toward the first major turning points, toward the moments when the world finally begins to feel what has been forming in secret, toward the choices that transform a resistance